At $300, the Samsung Galaxy Gear watch has been a failure, an abject failure. The build quality was considered decent, however, the integration of apps and software has been laughed at. Samsung, I have to say, Samsung does sit at the top of the market when it comes to Android phones. That's a fact. Unfortunately, Samsung has shitty software. Their apps are pretty much the quickest to come out since they do sit at the top of the Android market. But compared to Apple, Samsung phones are passable garbage. Yes, I sound exactly like a fanboy saying that, but the simple fact is, if you take an objective look, sit back, and actually pay attention to the reason why people are buying Apple products, what you would notice is, we buy Apple products because the build quality is higher. For one, the software, the applications that come out are better. Now, when you filter that down from the phones and you go to the watches, what you see is that Samsung heard that Apple was building an Apple Watch, so they raced to the market to get their Apple clone watch on the market before Apple could. I've seen this behavior from them before. When the iPad first came out, it only had one camera in the back. So Samsung said, fuck that, we're going to release a camera in the front and the back. Yeah, they put it to market first in the Samsung Galaxy Tab. The problem was the software sucked. Like, yeah, you can have a camera in the front, you can have a camera in the back, like the Motorola Razr V3. The V3X had a camera in the front and the back, and I really expected that the Motorola Razr would be one of the first phones where you could actually do a FaceTime type video conferencing. Samsung put it on the market. Motorola had it first, but Samsung never ever advertised it properly, and they never ever built software or firmware that could properly handle it. It appears to me that Samsung has an inferiority complex compared to Apple. When they're not copying Apple products directly, they're building things that one-ups Apple every single time Apple releases anything to market. I consider Samsung the builder of quote-unquote fuck iPhone phones. It's almost like choosing to buy a Kia K900 over a Mercedes E-Class simply because the K900 has 50 spark plugs and the E-Class only has 42. It's one-upping, and it's ridiculous. It's like, if you're going to build something, if you're going to design something, do it better. Focus on making your product better. Get a bigger focus group. Make your product stand out. Advertise your product. The Galaxy Gear is a joke. I know a welfare recipient who has one, who used her welfare check to purchase one, and I'm looking at her like, you look like the biggest badge whore I've ever seen, and you look ridiculous. Talking to your fucking wrist to answer a call. Most people argue that a phone is supposed to simply be for making calls. However, the smartphone shuts them up because it's basically a computer in the palm of your hands that makes calls while you're doing other things on it, like using the internet, making porno videos or whatever. But if that's the case, then a watch is supposed to simply be for checking the time. I do not see the point of these watches beyond the fitness aspect. However, if it was possible to put apps such as pilot apps like Cessna, ProFlight, maybe I'd be more interested in it. But the simple fact of the matter is, I'm not talking into my wrist. If you're exercising with one of these things, your hands are by their sides swinging. Or perhaps you're swimming, or perhaps you're golfing. You don't have time to talk into your wrist. To me, that's absolutely ridiculous. That's also the reason why I'm absolutely surprised that Apple played into this nonsense and actually built an iWatch. I didn't believe it was going to happen until earlier today. I really just didn't believe it was going to happen. I also didn't believe that the 5.5-inch iPhone was coming because I knew it would cannibalize the sales of the iPad mini LTE. After all, the only thing we really want is a big screen iOS device so that we don't have to pay any extra money to tether the cellular service from our iPhones to our iPads. Now, with the 5.5 iPhone, I won't need an iPad or any other tablet for that matter. All my business I can get done in the palm of my hands. There's a lot of things that they haven't talked about at Apple. First of all, this thing is water resistant. It's not waterproof. Second of all, we don't know how much it's going to cost. It may cost at least $350. But if you go on the Apple website, they haven't told you exactly how much it's going to cost, so God knows what it'll cost. There are a couple of things that we do know, however. We know that it has infrared sensors on the back in order to check your skin, in order to figure out what your heart rate is, which, in my opinion, that's you know, it's an inefficient way of managing a fitness app. But at any event, I'm sure they've tested it and they know that it must work, and they've probably had a good focus group so that they, you know, tested on different people with different skins, different amounts of hair, and this, that, and other. They have a digital crown which you can roll so that you can go from app to app. They have a touch screen on the thing, and there were a couple of other things that kind of struck me. I wasn't really impressed by the way it looks. It looks good, but there's a choice between a 1.5-inch screen and a 1.7-inch screen. As I said, we don't know exactly how long the battery is going to last, but I'm thinking you're going to have to recharge this thing every single day, or at the most you're going to have, or at the least you're going to have to recharge it probably once every 2 days. They also didn't talk about how you're going to manage the phone, like how you're going to remove apps, how you're going to add apps, this, that, and other. I'm sure a lot of it will have to do with iTunes. Most likely, the charging connector that they have that's similar to my MagSafe, most likely it'll be plugged to iTunes and you'll be able to update directly from your computer or probably from your phone. But I'm thinking it's going to come directly from iTunes. Now, the one thing that I did hear that was interesting is the fact that they're not allowing this to be used with any other phone except an Apple phone. You're going to have an Apple phone, and the only people who will be able to have one of these are going to be Apple iPhone owners. I really like that, and there's a reason why I like that. These devices, in my opinion, don't compete with each other. The Galaxy Gear doesn't compete with the iWatch. I don't really believe that Apple is really competing with Samsung. They are competing with the Android market for market share, yes, but they're not really competing with Samsung, because Samsung is just in it to copy, and they're going to put as much shit on the market as they possibly can to beat Apple at their own game. Unfortunately, it's never going to work. So in any event, as for this person who I was mentioning, who I think looks like the biggest badge whore in the entire world, wearing name brand shit, thinking that anybody's going to be confused and assuming that you're anything more than mooching off the system. The Galaxy Gear watch that she had on, I thought looked absolutely ridiculous, and it just makes me feel good to know that I won't see any badge whores walking around with an iWatch who have a Galaxy whatever phone in their pocket connected to T-Mobile, which is probably the cheapest, shittiest service that I've ever seen. You can't get calls in basements, you can't get calls in the back of Pathmark, you can't get calls in the back of Fortune Off. It's the worst service I've ever seen. I hate calling people on T-Mobile. When I talk to them, I'm like, why the fuck don't you have AT&T or Verizon? Because I can barely hear you. But at any event, I'll be watching. I'll be waiting. I want to see this thing in person. I really don't think I'm going to buy one. And from what it looks like it's better than the Galaxy Gear simply because the band is better, and most likely people are going to take to it way quicker than they take to that Galaxy Gear bullshit. So, yeah, call me a fanboy. But as far as I'm concerned, when Apple tests their products and Apple releases their products, they do a far better job than Samsung does.